Okay, now we're going to add shading to our drawing, and we're going to work from dark to light. We're going to use all of our knowledge of using pressure to create different tones, different shades, and we're also going to have a little attempt at blending. But this is quite tricky, so don't worry if you don't get it straight away. It's just something that comes with practice, okay? So we're going to start off with just shading the dark areas. Now when you are shading, it's very important that the direction of your shading, it all flows the same way. So I'm going to attempt to shade this little area here. I'll zoom right in for you. And I'm going to start off with my dark tone. And that's because on the picture it is very, very dark. So all of my shading lines, as you can see, they all flow in the same direction. And what I'm doing is I'm just copying the outline of the shape. That is it. So I'm following that lovely long line. Now you can follow that all the way down, or if you want to show off some skill, you can start to curve your shading around because the shape does curve. So that's up to you. But all the lines are nice and neat. They stay inside the shape and they all travel in the same direction. So all of these shading lines, I'm now following the outline of the shape over here. And then I'm just going to curve at the corner because the shape curves. And there we go, we have a very nice, neat, dark section. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just complete all of the dark areas now. So looking at your picture and just completing all of the dark areas. All of your lines, all of the shading lines just flowing in the same direction. Now this shape here, it's quite round. What I'm going to do, if you're unsure of what direction to follow, because there's so many different angles on the outline of the shape, just choose one of them. So you could choose that one and you could curve your shading to make it look nice and round. Or you could choose this line here and curve it that way. That's totally up to you. As long as you're following one of the outlines of the shape, that's absolutely fine. Keep looking at your picture to know where you need to go lighter, because although it is really, really dark, there is some little light bits in it. So reduce your pressure where it is light. And I'm just curving my shading because the shape's quite a curvy shape. So I'm just following that curvy outline. So I've chose to follow this one. Now as you're shading away, you might spot some little mistakes that you've done. That's absolutely fine because you can correct them as you go. So I'm just going to correct mine. Now, as you move down to this second shape, you'll notice on the picture that there is a little white line, and that's just so that you can see the actual different body parts separated. So don't forget to leave that little white line. If you did miss that, just use your rubber. That's what it's there for. And again, we are paying close attention to the picture so that we know exactly what shades go where, because on my picture here, it's just a little bit lighter over this side of that second body part. So I'm just going to remind you one more time. When you are shading, it's very important that all of your shading lines, they all flow in the same direction. You have none of them that are crossing over like this in different directions. We want your shading lines to be nice and neat and all in the same direction. The golden rule is to generally just follow the outline of the shape that you are shading, and that tells you what the direction of your shading should be. Okay. So now I've got most of the dark areas. The next thing to do is to start shading, I think, the legs, because the legs are pretty dark. But just pay attention, because not all of the areas on the legs are dark. It tends to just be one side of the leg, which makes it look 3D. If you shade one side dark and one side lighter, it does make it look quite 3D. And I do think it's easier to shade the darkest bit first, and then ease up on the pressure as you get into the lighter bits. So dark side first, keep all your shading lines in the same direction, and then reduce your pressure where it starts to go light. So sometimes to stop your drawing from smudging, sometimes I'll just put a piece of paper under my hand, and that is because your hand, it does pick up pencil, so that's another little tip for you. When you get to the GCSE years, you probably want to be doing this, using this rule every time you do a drawing. It helps to keep the detail in your drawing, stop smudge marks, and stops your hand from getting dirty. Now I'm noticing on the legs that there's a few little hairs, so I'm just going to draw those hairs in. You don't have to press very hard, just nice and gentle, and just make sure that your pencil is sharp. Always looking at that picture, never making it up. So following the direction of the outline of the shape, we are using 3 different tones. All of your shading lines are moving in the same direction because they're following the outline of the shape. And you are looking at the picture to make sure you know what tones go where. Okay, when you move on to the body part, it gets the direction gets a bit easier because you were just following the big body shape. You do have to look very carefully at the picture to make sure you know where your tones are going to go. So I'm just going to start off at the top and all of my lines are going to move down. Looking at the picture, it's nice and dark at the edge. Then we have a light patch and then it gets a medium tone. We have a little light source over here, so I'm going to just sketch that in. We have a little light source over here. This is where the light is hitting the back of the beetle. Now when you are shading a large area, it's very tempting to do huge shading lines, but it's very important to keep them nice and small so that you maintain your control. So you can soften the edge by just giving it a tiny little smudge, but careful you don't take away your lovely whites because we want a nice wide variety of tones, as many as we possibly can. We want at least 3. So dark, medium and light. So now the outline is starting to curve, my shading's going to start to curve. So I'm just working back through this side of the beetle before I move on to the other side, just to make sure that all of my tones are the correct tone. So if I need to put some darker bits in, I can always apply a little bit more pressure. And if I have gone too dark, I can always use my rubber just to bring a little bit back. Make sure that all of your shading lines are travelling in the same direction. So don't forget, a good artist always looks at that picture to make sure that everything is going in the right place. I do think this side is a little bit trickier because around the really dark bits you've got light, so I can see white around the really dark bits. So you've just got to make sure that you do keep that. And if you have missed it, just use a rubber to take it back. So that's what I'm doing right now, using a rubber to take it back lighter. It's a good way, and you know, the way that you use your rubber is the same way that you would use your pencil. So your rubber lines are all in the same direction. Make sure you are keeping your shading lines nice and small, not trying to do too much at once. I always say keep your pressure low, and then what you can do if you need to go darker, very easy, you just keep layering over the top. But if you go too dark too soon, it's very difficult to take it back with a rubber. And then when you think you're finished, that is the point where you start to go back around everything and double check that you've got all the correct tones in the right places. So this is the part that takes the longest, going through and checking everything. And there we go, we have a beetle drawing where I have shown the skills of different tones through different pressures of my pencil. I've kept all of my shading lines in the same direction, using the outline of the shape to tell me which direction that is. And I've even had a little go at blending from dark to light. As you can see in places around here, I've blended from dark to light. There might be some stop starts, but that's because in the picture there's a couple of stop starts. But if you want to be very, very technical, you can take them away and really upskill your drawing. So that is up to you. And if you finish before the rest of the class, you are going to use the full amount of time that you have been given to double check and spot the difference between the picture and your drawing.